all need to remember that we're part of a fellowship together. 1 Samuel chapter 17 is where I need to turn my Bible as well. Have y'all ever been down to Charleston? My brother went to the Citadel, and so while we were down there, I went to Charleston a lot, all the way through college. I went to Georgia Southern, but for some reason I always meandered through the weekends through Savannah or down to Charleston. It was just I think it's one of the best cities in the United States. I mean, it's just a wonderful city to live in. Next to Lillington, there's Charleston. Okay? But have y'all ever been across the Cooper River Bridge? I'm not talking about the new Ravenel Bridge. Okay? The new Ravenel Bridge is nice. The Cooper River Bridge looked like something that came out of dystopian Middle Earth. Okay? You remember that big metal structure that was there? And you came in the first part, one side of Cocaine, so going over to the Isle of Palms, it was like you were going straight uphill and then straight downhill. All right? Coming back, and one of them had 2 lanes, the other one had 3. Why couldn't they both have 3? You know? Because I only wanted to ride in the middle. In other words, I have a giant in my life, and big, tall bridges is one of them. Especially when I'm not the one driving over the big, tall bridge. And so I did something unique while I was driving through Charleston. I figured out there was another way I could get to the Isle of Palms. Did you know there's another way you can get to the Isle of Palms? You have to go up about 10 miles and go over the Ashley River Bridge. And as you go over the Ashley River Bridge, you'll come back around into the Isle of Palms. But it's about 10, 15 minutes out of the way to go that way. But so that I did not have to go on the Cooper River Bridge, I would get on the Ashley River Bridge up in North Charleston and come around and go down to the Isle of Palms. Why am I telling you this? Because don't we do the same thing with some of our giants? We do everything we can to try to bypass it, get around it. It might take us 10 or 15 years out of our way. But we would still rather do that than to go and face our giant. But the truth be told, the truth is that our giants are still over there. And we still need to face them. Somebody did something really slick. When we were down in Charleston a few years ago, I did not know this, but they have built a brand new bridge. Did you know they built a new bridge? All of you probably know because you lived here, but I was in a foreign country of Kentucky for a little while. Okay? And while we lived over there, they built a new bridge called the Ravenel Bridge, and we were in downtown Charleston. I don't remember what we were doing. We were going around the Battery, and I did not know that they had built a new bridge. And we were coming around the side of Highway 17 to get back up on Highway 17. And I thought, well, I'm going to go this way so I can go over on the Ashley River Bridge. And I looked over, and there was this brand new bridge right over there. You know what I did? I gave that bridge a try. And the Ravenel Bridge is so much nicer. You know, it's not like straight up and straight down. It's kind of like an easy, gentle slope all the way around. In fact, I liked it so much, I turned back around, we parked the car. You can ask LaDonna. I had her let me out so that I could go for a run over the bridge because I figured I could run on that one, but I couldn't run on the one that went straight up. It was a great run, too. Because no matter what, we've got to face our giants. And if we would just learn how to face them, maybe it would be better for us. David and Goliath, facing our giants. It's kind of a lengthy section today, so let's just hold on together as we read this. I'm going to pick up, I think it's around verse 12. Is that right? Now, thank you. Now, David was the son of Ephrathite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons in Saul's time. He was old and well advanced in years. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to war. The first was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days the Philistines came forward every morning and every evening, took his stand. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah and a roast of grain, and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers, and hurry to the camp. Take these 10 cheeses to the commander of the unit. See how your brothers are, and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines. Early in the morning, David left the flock with a shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines, facing each other, and David had left his things for the battle lines and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion, came from Gath, stood out from the lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. And when the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great reward to the man who kills him. He will even give his daughter in marriage and will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel." David asked the man standing near him, "What will be done to the man who kills the Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" That's an important phrase there. They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, "This is what will be done for the man who kills him." When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the man, he burned in anger at him. "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." "Now what have I done?" said David. "Can I leave? Can I even speak?" He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter. And the men asked him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. And David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." And Saul replied, "You are not able to go and fight against the Philistine, not able to go against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been fighting a fighting man from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued it from the sheep from its mouth. And when it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant also killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defiled the armies of the living God. The Lord, who delivered him from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, there's some of us in here who have been caught by our lions and our bears and our Goliaths, and we are trapped. Deliver us today. I pray this in the most precious name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. So, wonderful story where we haven't even gotten to the good part yet, and we're just kind of building up to it. Last week we kind of learned about the Philistines and Israel, and they were fighting, and Goliath comes out. Somebody sent me a text message, how much does a shekel weigh last week? A shekel weighs about half an ounce. All right, so his shirt that weighs 5,000 shekels weighed about 120 pounds. Okay? He was just a giant of a man in stature and in physical presence. He looked like somebody that was about to tear you apart. And how did Israel respond? With fear. Instead of rising up to meet their giant, they fell back in fear. Saul, who was king, who was the champion of the Jews, who stood heads over the Jews, who was supposed to be the best champion of the Jews, stood back in fear. Because Saul was being plagued by an evil spirit. If you remember, Saul had chosen to disobey God. And when you choose to disobey God, you open up the door to evil. Let me say it another way. When you close the front door to God, you open the back door to the devil. And so that's kind of what happened to Saul. He opened up his back door, and Saul was being oppressed by an evil spirit. He was literally going crazy. And so there was this conflict that broke out. There's this Philistine that came up and said, "Well, why don't we do what's customary? I'll come out as the champion of the Philistines. You send me a man who can be your champion, as if a man can solve this problem. Let me put it to you this way. Remember I told you about that trip last night to Fayetteville to go get Emma's ears pierced? Great trip, okay? On the way back, though, it's raining and pouring, and you know they've made those new highways and new roads to come back. And so apparently, I don't know if I ever even really got on Fort Bragg Boulevard anymore, okay? You just kind of meander around, and I kept on trying to get off the wrong place over and over and over again. There just needs to be one road between here and the mall, and that is all. LaDonna looked over at me, and she said, a man must have made these roads. And I said, yeah, you're right. And I said, what do you think would have happened if a woman would have built it? She said, oh, this world would be such a better place. And that, I mean, honestly, guys, that statement may be true. Why? I'll answer that in a minute, but I'll give you a little preview. The world may be a better place if women took leadership, because we as men have stood far too much time in the back of the line when the battle's in the front. But I'll finish preaching that little point in a minute. So now we get this picture today of David. David is one of many sons of Jesse. Jesse is older. Scripture says he's much older, grandfather age, as if he was now useless. Had a conversation with a guy this week, that was going kind of along this same path. I'm older. I am retired. I don't need to do. Let those young people do them. Let me tell you, young people feel the same way. All right? We're all tired. But let me put it to you this way. God never called any of us into retirement. And I wish that we would stop looking at people at their age to determine their value. Young or old, our value is given to us in Jesus Christ. He calls, He anoints, and He empowers. So if you're 98 and God calls and empowers you, it's the same as if you are R8 and God calls and empowers you. He calls, He empowers. I wish we had that same vision. Jesse saw there was a battle going on. He sent his 3 oldest sons to participate in the battle because they're still caught up in the same problem. I have man's problem. I'm going to keep throwing men at it. Wink, wink, women. Okay? All right. So keep throwing these men at this problem. Now, Eliab, if you remember, is the oldest son, and Eliab was the one that Saul walked into Jesse's house and said, you're going to be the next king. And God said, no, he's not. That's not the anointed. Eliab was strong. He was powerful. He was handsome. He was well-liked. He was a leader of men. But that wasn't God's man. Where was God's man? Do you remember? He was out in the shepherd's field. David. David would be anointed king that day. David was a shepherd. Jesse being from Bethlehem, by the way, do you remember what Bethlehem is famous for? Okay, don't tell me the birthplace of Jesus. That does work too. But not at this time, but in a few years from now, Bethlehem will become famous for being the place where sacrificial sheep are kept for the temple. David is out there doing that beginning work where Jesse's sheep are kept. And let me tell you, David is responsible to something. He is responsible to his sheep. I wish that we would feel so responsible. Scriptures tell us that David's traveling back and forth between the line of battle and the sheep. In fact, that's not even a true statement. I got ahead of myself. David's traveling back and forth, not between the line of battle, but between Saul. Do you know why he's going back and forth between Saul and the line of battle? Because Saul's going back to his crazy fits. And David, if you remember, sang songs to Saul to soothe his mind. And so David's going to Saul's tent and singing him songs that while he's in the middle of conflict and battle, his evil spirits might be soothed. And then he's going back to tend the sheep. Because David's responsible to tend his sheep. I want us to feel responsible to be tenders of sheep. That even when there's a giant at our door, We're still going to be responsible to the sheep that we're supposed to tend. Let me put it to you this way. I reckon this with the modern worship wars. I want to have worship this way. I think we should sing 3 hymns and go home. I think we should sing songs like this. Let me tell you, if you are condemning worship, you have probably already missed the worship that you were supposed to have, because worship was never about any of us. Now, trust me, I like worship a certain way. I want things to be exciting. I want things to be entertaining. I'm with you. I get what you're saying. I want to be engaged, but I don't want to be engaged with the stuff, but with the Jesus of the stuff. But when we start saying, well, I think it should be like this, we've just missed the worship. And when we start, this just blows my mind. Can I get up just a little bit higher on my soapbox for a minute? Just a little bit higher. We're going to criticize worship when it's Jesus that promised that wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, I will be there. So who's in the space right now? So who are we criticizing? Who are we to criticize Jesus? Now, I want you to worship. I want things to be entertaining. I want them to be exciting and lively. I get all of that stuff. You guys know me. I'm that kind of person. But what I don't want is for us to get our hearts in the wrong place. Because then we're just like a bad David that goes to fight our conflicts and say, stuff has to be my way. Worship has to be my way. And we forget our sheep. And we stop tending and caring for each other. Because when we go off and say things have to be my way, it no longer becomes about the Lord, then we start leaving people behind. And I've never really felt called to sacrifice people. Hymn versus praise and worship song. I don't know if I can sacrifice somebody for that one. We follow the Lord. And we don't leave our sheep behind. Never, ever forget to tend your sheep. Never forget to tend your sheep. The story continues that David is given this charge from his father to go and take some bread, some cheese, some snacks to the front line. Now, some of them are supposed to go to his brothers because he's going to check on his sons. Now, do you remember when I told you that King Saul was, pressed down by an evil spirit? He's going crazy, caught in fear. The same fear is now spreading out throughout the countryside. Jesse, who's not on the front line, is caught in that same fear and is now trying to manipulate what's going on in the front line to make sure his sons are getting taken care of. Because it's not happening in the way that you think. And it's even shocking that it's coming from Jesse. Jesse knows who God is, has seen the deliverance, saw David anointed as king in his old house, but still isn't living in a trusting relationship with God. He's not looking at Goliath and saying, well, David's king sent him out there first. God said he was going to be king, so David can take care of Goliath. No. Everybody's caught up in fear. In fact, Jesse, so much so that he did send bread to his son, but he also sent 10 cheeses to the chief commander to get assurances. Now, you would say those assurances are to make sure his sons don't really fight in battle, but they actually have another purpose as well. And assurance in this period of time was also a document that said that those sons' wives could remarry. Jesse may have been trying to assume or trying to make sure that his family line was going to continue if his 3 oldest sons were to be killed in battle. And so he sent to actually get a document from the chief commander and assurance that his in-laws, his daughters, could remarry and his family line could continue, because he didn't have much faith in his boys being able to overtake Goliath. Wow. It is a dangerous position for us all to be in when we doubt God more than we trust Him. When we get caught up in fear and shrink back more than move forward in faith. David goes to the front line. He doesn't go to the front line, he goes to the back line. But let's take a little note about this. Early in the morning, David left the flock with the shepherd in verse 20. What did David do? David left the sheep with a shepherd. Did he just, he got marching orders. Did he just leave the sheep behind? For the second time in this passage, we see how important the sheep are to David. And he was not going to sacrifice them even though he had to go to the front line. David gets up and he goes and takes his stuff up, and he actually enters in from the back. And please, this is not like the Battle of the Bulge and there's 25 trenches and 18 different lines of battle. Okay? He went to the back of the line where the cooks are, and up about a half a mile ahead is where the battle is. And the battle soldiers are down in the trenches. Because if you're being shot at by the enemy, what do? You huddle down in the trenches so that you don't get your head shot off. But if you're huddled down in the trenches, can you face your giants? Faith is sometimes risky. And sometimes our faith on a battlefield looks different than our faith in our pews. It's easy to sit in our pews and address the battle. It's much harder to stick our heads up out of those foxholes and ditches than when the battle really comes, isn't it? David comes into the back, and he sees that Goliath and the men, the Israelites, are making their fighting lines because they're about to shout to each other. Can I poke fun at this for a minute? I'm going to poke fun at it. I don't know what's up with these Israelites and why they're even making a fighting line. What are they going to do? You know how many days they've made this fighting line? 40. For 40 days, they have made this fighting line. For 40 days, they have gotten out of their trenches, gone up to face the Israelites, and for 40 days, they have gone back without doing battle. Wow. I imagine this is like day 39. Okay? And on day 39, they've come up there and go, yay, we're all going to go back to our trenches after we get finished yelling at you. Because they were scared and caught up in fear. And as they get caught up in fear, they just get more entrenched instead of battling. Fear is the enemy of faith. David goes from the back to the front once he sees the fighting men, fighting lines addressed, and he starts asking, what's going on? Why are you standing here? And David sees a physical problem with a spiritual perspective. There is a giant holding the men of God back, but our God is bigger than the giant. David sees the army and the men in spiritual conflict, and David sees their problem with the spiritual eyes of God, that God is an overcomer of giants. David asks them what's going on. They share that over and over again for 40 days, Goliath has come out here. And as Goliath has come out here, he has overtaken them with fear. And he's yelled at them, what kind of men do you think that you are? Your God can't even overcome me. He's intimidated them and he's put them down. And so David goes from the back of the line to the front. Because when you have a spiritual perspective, you move from the back to the front because there's conflict in the front. Gentlemen, please tune in with me. That there's got to be a conflict that we have to face. And some of us need to move from the back of the line to the front of the line. We've been playing back good enough at the back of the pew. And we were wondering why our world is getting worse and worse and worse. Because maybe it's time for some of us in our families to come from the back to the front and start fighting our giants. Maybe it's time we do the same thing as a church. That we come from the back of the line to the front of the line as a church and start facing the problems of our community. But we've become pretty comfortable on the back of the line in the trenches, haven't we? But God's calling us to get up out of the trenches because He's the person who delivers us from our giants. David says that he goes and he deals with shepherds and bears. My favorite part of this story is just right here. Because as David goes and he deals with shepherds and bears, he says that he goes and takes the sheep out of the mouths of the lions and bears. So picture it with me like this. The sheep come to the sheep pen. The lions and bears come to the sheep pen. They get a sheep and they take it back to a cave. David goes and finds which cave they are in while the bear or the lion is still injuring the sheep, and rescues the injured, broken sheep from the bear, because God rescues the injured and the broken. He goes and finds us in the middle of being trapped by our lions, where we're being injured and hurt, and He rescues us. And just as God goes and He rescues sheep and lion, David is saying, God has delivered our Goliath already. He delivers us from the caves. He can deliver us from our giants. Who needs deliverance today? Last night on our way back, this wonderful trip from Fayetteville, we stopped by the cookout. Have y'all ever been to a cookout before? Man, love cookouts. I am not a fan of fast food, but I liked the cookout. They make good hamburgers. What do all children like? McDonald's. McDonald's. Oh, man, McDonald's. You go to McDonald's. I used to be able to take kids to McDonald's, and Carter and Asher would get a Happy Meal. You know, a 4-piece chicken Happy Meal, and then they grew up. I won't even tell you what our grocery bill is like now. It is so frightening. All right? All they do is eat. They're like weeds. No. And they went to a 6-piece. You know, the Mighty Kids meal. So you've got a kids meal, the Happy Meal, but then you've got the Mighty Kids meal. You get 6 pieces of chicken and 2 orders of fries. You're like, yeah, I might want to go get that myself. That's not even good enough for us anymore. You know, now we're up to the 10-piece. What is it, like number 10 on the value, the menu order? And they ask the same question. Yes, I'd like a number 10. What's the question they ask every time? Do you want to supersize that? Do you want to make that bigger? Because we're trying to clog all of our arteries this morning. And you know what they say, right? Yes, I want a bigger drink. Yes, I want more fries. Yes, I want more. Why am I telling you this story? Because God today has supersized delivery for you. We've been dealing with our problems, and let me tell you, they're bigger than a Happy Meal problem, aren't they? Some of our problems are bigger than a Mighty Kids problem. They're huge problems, and all we have to do, what do I say when my kids tell me, can I have that supersized? Do I say, no, you can only have a Happy Meal. Just 4 pieces are good enough for you. Or no, you can only have a Mighty Kids meal. Those 6 pieces are good enough for you. No, you can't supersize that. The normal little small drink is just fine for you, young man. What do I say? Yes. Yes, you can have it. What do you think God's going to say to you? God, please deliver me. Look, I don't know what your future is. I don't know what giant you're facing. All I know is that God deals with giants. And the deliverance He has for you isn't Happy Meal size, it's super size. And I don't know what that deliverance looks like, but I can tell you He delivers you from giants. Some of us today need to come forward and say, God, please deliver me from my giant because I'm about to get defeated. Some of us need to come forward and we need to say, dear Lord, please, I've been focused on so many different things, and I thought that this was my giant, but I left my sheep behind. I left my family behind. I've left my friends and my faith behind, and God's calling us still tend for our sheep. You respond today as God has laid it on your heart. Maybe it's time for you to come from the back of the line to the front to face the giant that you've been avoiding. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we all love you. We confess, acknowledge that today we have giants in our lives and ask for some deliverance. We've been sitting in the back. We haven't been up for the conflict. Please help us. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's stand together and you respond as God has laid it on your heart.